All right, I will say good morning, a good tavach. Hopefully everyone had a beautiful, uplifting, and inspiring Shabbos. It is a great zechus, Baruch Hashem, to begin another week of Bava Kamma together. Sadly, but also excitingly, it's our last week of Bava Kamma. Sadly, because it's been such an incredible Masechta, and our trusted friend over 100 days, Baruch Hashem. But also excitingly, because in Meretz Hashem, when Bava Kamma ends, new doors open in Meretz Hashem. So we're going to make the most of being with our beloved friend, our best friend, Bava Kamma, Meretz Hashem, for the remaining days that we have him by our side. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for dedicating all the Shirman Drushels this month, with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of our refuahs for all of those in need, and the schus of our brave soldiers and the return of our hostages. The Schwartzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zechron Levracha, and the Ziv, Levine, and Berman families, in memory of Bill Ziv, Zev Shmuel ben Yisra. We dedicate all of Meseches Bava Kamma Li'ilui Nishmas Master Sergeant Yomi Charush Hashem Yikom Damo. We dedicate our learning Li'ilui Nishmas, the soldiers who have fallen in battle, Major Ayal Shumenov, Sergeant Neria Baliti, and Staff Sergeant Ido Eli Zrian. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families a nechama. And we thank our Daf Yomi pastry sponsor for today, Chief Beautiful Eric Schaefer. Can I remember Eric Schaefer? He still lives in town, Baruch Hashem, from Texas, right? From Texas now. So Eric Schaefer, in honor of his mother, Rus Bas Avram, who imbues her children and grandchildren with Yirah Shamayim, Avas Hashem, and teaches them Gemilos, Chasadim, and Lashon HaTov. Lashon HaTov. I got nervous when I read that last part. I read it too quickly. I thought it was like Lashon Hara. I was like, no, Lashon HaTov, Lashon HaTov, Baruch Hashem. All right, incredible. Amirat Hashem, Rusbas Avram should be gebenched with many more years of bracha, mazel, simcha, me'ev, esim, shalim, tovos. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, but the good news is tomorrow's daf is shorter, so we're gonna equal out. We're gonna equal out. And then the next day is a monstrosity, and then all right, whatever. Well, Amirat Hashem. One way or another, we always finish the Masechta. One way or another. All right, so today's daf is Kuf Tes Vav 115. We are picking up at the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Yud Daled Amud Beis 114b. Mishnah says as follows: Hamakir Kelav Usvarav Biyadacher. So we'll say a very interesting case here. A person, we'll call him Ruvain. Ruvain recognizes literally again his utensils or his books in the hands of another. So in other words, Ruvain sees his stuff in Shimon's hands. In Shimon's hands. So I will say, so now, and then one more piece. And I will say now, accompanying this, there was a shame. There was not a rumor, but again, there was news in the community that Ruvain had experienced the theft. So there's two things happening over here. Number one, people are talking about the fact that Ruvain had a burglary, right? That's number one. And number two, Ruvain sees his stuff in Shimon's possession. Now, both say, now what's interesting about this is, Ruvain is not accusing Shimon of being the thief. That's not what's happening over here. But what is happening over here is, what we're assuming happened over here, is that someone stole property from Ruvain and what? Sold it, and Shimon unwittingly purchased stolen property. So we'll say, so now what do you do? This is a very interesting case, because here, what you have is a victim, Ruvain, but then you also have Shimon, who really didn't do anything wrong, right? Shimon bought stuff, not knowing that it was stolen property. So what do you do in such a case like this? Yeshava lo lokeach Kamma. No, son, v'yitol. So we'll say what happens in this case is, so Shimon, the purchaser, swears that he bought this property not knowing that it was stolen. He swears how much he bought it for, and Ruvain has to pay him back. We'll say we're going to see this is going to be something that is called Takanas HaShuk. Takanas HaShuk essentially says that we have to protect purchasers. When a person purchases property and he has no reason to know, we'll say, you go ahead and you decide, you want to buy one of those monstrosity flat screen televisions, right? For the purpose of watching shiurim, right? Because what else are you going to do with it, right? And let's say, and it goes ahead and I don't know, what do these things normally cost? Right, $1,000? Yeah. Oh, everyone, monstrosity. How much is a monstrosity? How much? 2,000? None of us. I don't know. No one's the answers. This is a trick question. I want to see who really rattles this up. Oh, it's $2,499. You know, that's not, right? So let's say, yeah, right, and you find the guy who sells it to you for $250. So obviously, right, something's up. Something's up. So we're not talking about that kind of case. We're talking about a situation where, again, Shimon bought the object, had no reason to think that it was a stolen object. So as such, there has to be some level of buyer protection that Chazal create as well. So interestingly enough, in this case over here, what's going to happen is Shimon's going to swear, I went ahead and I bought this object for X amount of money. Ruvain is going to pay. Now, Ruvain is the owner of the object. So Ruvain, the owner of the object, is paying Shimon in order to get his object back. He's buying it back. He's essentially buying it back. Gemara says, "Ve'im lav." And I will say now, if not what? If there wasn't a shmua shel gezel, in other words, if no one was talking about the fact that Reuven was a victim of a burglary, so lav kali menu. So then ultimately, in that case, Reuven is not believed to make his claim. Shani omer machron la'achar v'lakhan zehemenu. So I'll say, if there's no call that there was a burglary, that there was a robbery, so then Reuven is not believed to say that the object was stolen from me. Why? Because we just assume what happened over here. Reuven stole it. Reuven sold it, and what? He has seller's remorse. He has seller's remorse. So I'll say, so that's halacha in the Mishnah. So again, a very simple and straightforward halacha. Two criteria. Number one, so Reuven recognizes his property in the possession of someone else. He has made a claim of burglary, and people are talking about the fact that there was a robbery, that there was a burglary. So what's halacha? Shimon the purchaser swears, I bought the object for X amount of dollars. Reuven pays him that amount, effectively buys back his property, and Shalom Yisrael. Good, says the Gemara. I don't understand. Just because people are talking about the fact that there was a burglary, right, that there was a robbery, that Reuven's property was stolen, why should that matter? Maybe Reuven in fact sold the property. He had seller's remorse. And Reuven is starting the call. In other words, we'll say, we all know, it does not take all that much, right, to get people talking about something, right? All you need to do is float it a little bit. So maybe Reuven sold it legitimately, had seller's remorse, and now he begins the rumor mill. So the Gemara says, "Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav kigon shebo bnei adam esoch beiso va'amar ve'thikan balayla va'amar nignevu kelai." So Rabbi say, now what's the case? Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav. The case over here is where Reuven had people staying in his house, and then again, in the middle of the night, he goes in and starts claiming stuff was stolen from me. So in this case, we're able to say this is more like circumstantial evidence, being that he had people in his home. So Lamai said there's grounds to believe it. The Gemara says, Kol shekain, ila matzah. I don't understand, even more so. If Reuven wants to invent information, right, or wants to create an alternate reality, the fact that there are people staying in his house gives him the ability to do so. In other words, what the Gemara is just trying to figure out is, it's so easy for Reuven to begin this rumor and give him the ability to get back his stuff. So the Gemara says, Rav Kahana Messiah Mishmei Rav Kigon Shahaisa Machteres Chatura Besoch Beiso V'gam Bnei Adam Shalanu Besoch Beiso Yatzu V'an Burkaos Shal Kelim Al Kisvehem V'akol Omrim Nignevu Kelev Shal Ploni. All right, so we'll say, so listen to this. So now Rav Kahana goes ahead and highlights the name of Rav. Here's the case. The case is where somebody dug a tunnel into Reuven's house, and people who were staying in Reuven's house left Reuven's house with bags of stuff over their shoulders. All right, so it's either Shabbos leftovers or, right, all his stuff. So I'll say, so so the Gemara says, pretty now, and Reuven's claiming I was robbed. I should say, so this is a pretty strong case. In other words, you have enough circumstantial evidence. The tunnel, they're walking out with the stuff on their shoulder. These are people who had access to Reuven's stuff because Reuven had invited them to stay at his home. So you put all of this together, and you have a pretty strong circumstantial case that indeed Reuven was robbed. V'dilma kelim havu saram lahavu. So I was thinking, maybe they just stole utensils, but they didn't steal any books. This svarim. No, we'll say part of the rumor, part of the claim was that they took They took utensils and svarim. Valechash dilma zutri vikaton ravravi. Maybe they only took small books or small utensils, and he's claiming large books or large utensils. Dekaamri sefer ploni uploni. Ruvain's making very specific claims. They took so and so and so and so items. I v'dilma havi atiki vikaton charati. Maybe they stole old stuff, and he's claiming new stuff. Amrav kigon da amri halalu kelev shalploni halalav svarav shalploni. We're talking about a case over here where people recognize that these utensils are utensils that belong to these utensils, or these svarim belong to Ruvain. Okay, so we'll say, so that's how we're setting this up. So we'll say, so let's pause here for just a second. So what's happening? So a very simple case, right? Ruvain goes ahead and sees his stuff in the hands of Shimon. Ruvain makes a claim, that's my stuff. In addition to Ruvain's claim, there's also a call, right? There's also like a whole rumor going around, more than a rumor. There's discussion that Ruvain was robbed. Now what the Gemara adds in, there's also circumstantial evidence. There was tunneling into Ruvain's home. People who stayed there, right, left with stuff on their shoulders. So you put all of this together, Abosai, and kind of the narrative we construct, we're not accusing Shimon of being a thief, but rather we're saying that Shimon must have bought property from whoever stole it from Ruvain. Therefore, what does the halacha give Ruvain the right to do? The halacha gives Ruvain the right to buy back his property. That's what it is. As opposed to saying, listen, Ruvain, sorry, unless you could prove something, then there's nothing to do here. The halacha says there's enough circumstantial evidence over here to say the stuff that's in Shimon's possession is really Ruvain's. But again, Shimon, no one has a right to put Shimon at a disadvantage. So therefore, Ruvain, we give you the right to buy back your property. Shimon, swear, how much did you buy your property for? Ruvain, give him that amount. Ruvain gets that back his property. Shimon is made whole, and Shalom al Yisrael. Really fascinating case. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, good. Did Rav really say this? Remember again, Rav was the one who set up this case as the circumstantial evidence. Somebody had tunneled into Ruvain's house. The people who were staying there left with bags of stuff over their shoulders. Did Rav really say this? Rav said, now watch this. This is fascinating. Bava Machteres. Excuse me. We'll say Bava Machteres means like this. I'm good, thank you. Bava Machteres means like this. Bava Machteres means somebody breaks into your home at night to steal stuff. Now, Bava Machteres means any situation. It literally means someone who comes to steal covertly. Now, listen to this. Rav says that when someone comes to steal property covertly, v'natal kelim v'yatza. So let's say he was successful. He's right. So we'll say, so watch this. So Ruvain breaks into Shimon's house. Or let's say better, Shimon tunnels into Ruvain's house, right? Comes under the cover of darkness, all right, secretively, and steals stuff from Shimon. What's the halacha? And let's say again, Shimon steals from Ruvain, right? And now let's say what happens. Shimon gets out of there. He gets away with it, right? He gets in, he gets out. What's the halacha? Potter. Listen to this. Shimon, the thief, is Potter. Now we'll say, why? Well done, right? Well done, right? Why is he Potter? We'll say, this is wild. Why is he Potter? My taima bidami kaninu. Because I will say, listen to this. Get ready. I will say, what is the halacha if you find someone breaking into your house at night, right? Surreptitiously. What's the halacha? You are allowed to kill them. You're allowed to kill them, right? We'll say, in other words, we had the castle domain before legal. In other words, somebody's coming into your house under the cover of darkness. You do not know what's happening there, right? You don't know what's going on. Furthermore, again, I both say, a thief knows that very often a homeowner is going to defend his home and his property by any means necessary. Watch this. Therefore, when you are habab machteres, when you are a thief who steals repetitiously, you are doing so with risk to your own life. And in fact, technically speaking, you're liable to death. In other words, since the homeowner is empowered to take your life, thief's life, in order to protect his homestead, it's almost as if the thief is liable to a death penalty. Now, therefore, this makes it a case of what? Kimle b'derabba minei. It's fascinating. So in this moment now, the thief is liable to death because, again, the homeowner has the right to kill him in order to go ahead and... Now, obviously, again, if the guy's, standing there hands up, and you can't kill him, right? But lamaisa, in other words, if you do not know what's going on over here, in the confusion or ambiguity of the moment, it's understood that the homeowner is going to protect his home, is going to protect his property by any means necessary. As such, the thief, so to speak, is liable to a death penalty. This makes it kimle b'draba minei, so it's a death penalty and financial liability simultaneously. So this is incredible, no? So therefore, technically speaking, if the thief makes it out alive, he's pater. He's pater. Now, we'll see the halacha l'mayis on this, right? But he's pater. He's pater. The idea is that he is not chayiv for any financial liability. Why? Because he was subject to a death penalty. So we'll say, so therefore, again, going back for just a second, Rav set this up as a whole case of tunneling. As a whole case of tunneling. That's Bava machteres. So why should the thief have any level of liability? So the Gemara says, Hani mili dekaninu machteres. The meikara masra nafshi liktala. So we'll say, that's true, when really the entire theft kind of took place through tunneling. Since he was ready to give his life for this, so therefore, kimlim b'derabba minei ultimately acquires the object. Aval hani kevim de lo masri nafshayo liktala lo. Remember again, this was different. In this case over here, remember again, and the way Rav set it up, there was a tunnel, but remember, the thieves didn't get in there through the tunnel. How did they get in there? They were invited guests. So this is not the same kind of case, right? Because remember again, they're not putting their life in mortal danger. The only time you're putting your life in mortal danger for the thief is when you're breaking in. But since they were invited in, this wouldn't be a case. Very interesting. Amar Rava. So Rava says as follows. Both say last line. Kuf Yud Daled Amud Beis. Very interesting. Amar Rava, lo shana ela balabais asay limkar kelav. Furthermore, I'm going to both say, when does this halacha apply, like we see in the Mishnah? Only if Ruvain is the type of balabais who normally sells his stuff. Ava balabais she'eno asay limkar kelav. But I both say balabais who does not normally sell his stuff. Top of Kuf Tesvav 115a. Then the Gemara says lo tzarech la dure alei. Kulehai. Rashi says over here, right? Rashi says the name of Sefer Ploni Uploni. I will say, remember again, previously in the Gemara, we were speaking about the idea that in order for this whole mechanism to work, of Reuven to be able to buy back his stuff, it has to be that's what? That we have very specific information about the stolen objects. So the Gemara is not qualifying this and says, this is only talking about a balabas who normally sells his stuff. But if a balabais doesn't normally sell his stuff, so therefore it would be uncommon for his property to be in the hands of someone else, you don't have to have this same level of specificity in order to be able to trigger the reclamation process. The Gemara says, the Dilma itzterichle lezuze v'zabin, but maybe Ruvain needed money, so decided to go ahead and sell off his stuff. Am Rav Ashi, harei yatsa lo shem geneva be'ir. No, Rav Ashi says, no, we take care of that. That's not a concern. Why? Because remember, as we set it up, people are already talking about that a theft took place. So because we were talking about a theft took place, we assume that Reuven is not selling stuff off of his own volition, but rather, again, he was robbed. All right, let's go back to this is a fascinating case. Itmar, Ganav umachar ve'achaka chokar aganav. Watch this. So let's say Shimon stole an object from Reuven. Shimon stole from Ruvain, and then I will say what happens, and he went ahead and he sold it to Levi. Now remember again, Levi is an innocent party over here. So right now, as it stands, Levi is in possession of Ruvain's object that he obtained through the theft of Shimon. Okay, after Levi purchases, after Levi now owns it, so the whole theft becomes discovered, and people now Reuven knows that it was Shimon who stole the object from him. So before we get into this, understand what's happening over here. If you're Reuven, right? What's the shaila? Who are you going after? Are you going after Shimon the thief? Or are you going after Levi, the current owner, so to speak, in quotations, right? Current owner of the object. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel Silber Amar Hadin im Harishon. So Rav says that ultimately again Reuven, who is ultimately again the owner, his claim is against the thief. Is against Shimon. Look at Rashi. Hadin Marishon. Rashi says, "Dino shabalabayis utfiyaso alaganafi ve'ina lokeach bal dino ve'imbalag vosemenu yitain damim ve'afagav shukar aganov lo amini yachzer lokeach kelim mechina ve'yiframin aganov." So listen to this. So because we know the thief, Reuven's claim is against Shimon, the thief. In other words, what Rav is saying is like this, says, Reuven can't go to Levi and say, Levi, that's my object, give it back to me. Give it back to me. In other words, Rashi points out over here is, if Reuven does want to go to Levi to get his object back, he can do that. But what does he have to do? What does he have to do? He's got to pay. He's got to pay. But assuming he does not want to pay, what he does is he goes to Shimon the thief and he sues him for damages, for theft. But again, he has no recourse. Reuven, the owner of that, has no recourse against Levi the buyer. His only recourse is against Shimon the thief. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, not true. Reuven has recourse against Levi, the purchaser. Rashi says, Dino shal balabayis im elokeachu v'yotzi imenu kelev bechinam. So no, so we'll say, so Rabbi Yochanan says, not true. Reuven could go over to Levi, the purchaser, say, Levi, that is my object, and I'm taking it back, and he doesn't have to pay Levi anything. He takes it. Then Abba say, of course, what's the rest of that story? So Levi, the purchaser, will go to Shimon the thief. We'll say, such a fascinating case, no? So let's analyze this. Rav Yosef says the truth is lo pligi. They're not really arguing. Kan lifnei yeyosh. One is talking about, I will say, before Reuven, the original owner, had yeyosh. If Reuven didn't yet have yeyosh hadin masheni, then I will say, if Reuven didn't have yeyosh, then what? Then he can go to Levi, the purchaser. I'd say, Levi, that's my object. I would never had yeyosh. Therefore, the object never left my possession. Give it back to me. Kan la'achar yeyosh, and I will say, as opposed to if Reuven had yeyosh, then hadin im harishon. Then again, I will say, assuming he had yeyosh, he gave up hope of ever retrieving the object. The object, therefore, again, effectively transferred over to Levi, and therefore Reuven's claim is only against the thief. Incredible. V'tarvahu isluhu Rav Chisda. And I will say, ultimately, both of them go ahead and hold over Rav Chisda. Now, what did Rav Chisda say? I will say, take a look at Rashi, 3 lines down from the top in the wide lines. Rav Chisda, Gazav lo nesiyashu abaylim. Rav Chisda said as follows: if you stole an object, right, Shimon stole from Reuven, and Reuven did not have yeyosh. And someone else came along and consumed the object. We just had this not so long ago. Right, so Rav Chisda says, essentially, the owner of the object could collect damages from either party. Right, either from the thief or from the person who consumed the object. Okay, so really Abaye velo pligi. So Abaye says, really, no one's arguing. So the Gemara says, ha matnos kuhuna kilifnei yeyosh dami upligi. Yet they will say, let's take a look at the case of matnos kuhuna. Right, matnos kuhuna is like a case of before yeyosh, and yet there is a machlokes. What's the case of matnos kuhuna? Listen to this interesting case. This nan. Amrlo, machar li me'er shapara. So we'll say, let's watch this. Right, Reuven goes over to Shimon, and Shimon's a butcher, and he says to Shimon, sell me the kishkas of the cow. Sell me the innards of the cow. V'haya behind matanos. And I will say now, included in those kishkas, remember again, a kohen, there are matnos kuhuna from every time you shecht an animal, right? There's the chest and the foreleg, right? Ultimately go to the kohen. Parts of the stomach as well. The more, right? So we'll say, so now let's say I go ahead and go to the butcher, and I purchase kishkas from the innards from the animal, and inside of those kishkas, inside are matnos kuhuna, right? In other words, the butcher never separated out the kohanic portion. They know. So what's the halacha? So matnos v'hayabahad matanos. No sin the kohen. So I, the purchaser, am obligated to give those portions to the kohen. Now this is very interesting. I will say I can't go ahead and subtract off the purchase price. In other words, I have to separate out the kohanic gifts, but I am not permitted to go ahead and take that off the purchase price that I'm giving to the butcher. Okay. Conversely, let's say I bought the kishkas in weight. So I bought, 20 pounds of kishka, right? Kishkas, right? In cow innards. And I will say, so now, same case, I have to remove some of it to give to Kohanim. In that case, no Kohen, umenakilo min adamim. In that case, I go ahead and In that case, I give the stomach or whatever else to the Kohen, and I am permitted to go ahead and take that off the purchase price. So I'll say it's interesting, which makes sense. In the first case, I'm buying an amount, lav dafka a weight. So therefore, again, it's understood that I have to separate out part of matnos kuna, and therefore I can't take that off the purchase price. When you're buying by weight, again, that weight includes the part that's going to be mine. But anything that's going to be matnos kuna comes off the purchase price. Rav said, we'll say first wide line, lo shanu ella sheshakal liatzmo. So we'll say, when is this true? When is this true? When is what true? In other words, that when you buy by weight, you could subtract off the amount that is the matnos kuhuna from the purchase price. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, lo shanu lakach hemena b'mishkal nostan lekoin demasha delakech al karchach nostan lekoin v'yitva damim ala min hamocher. So we'll say, so when do we say that I, the purchaser, have to give to the Kohen and then settle up a diminished price with the butcher? That's only if I went ahead and weighed it myself. But ultimately, if the butcher went ahead and weighed the insides of the cow, then hadin im hatabach. Then ultimately the Kohen has to settle up together with the butcher. Look at Rashi. Hadinim hatabach. Dino shal Kohen v'iruro ala tabachu. Then the Kohen has to settle up with the butcher himself. Rav l'tamei da'amr hadinim harishon the tabach kineged rishon v'lokeach havisheni. So we'll say, so this is very interesting, because what's happening over here is, in this kind of case, this would almost be like a situation of someone who stole. This would be like the case of Shimon, who stole from Ruvain and sold to Levi. So when the butcher goes ahead and sells me cow insides and didn't remove the matnos kahuna, and the butcher weighed it himself and sold it to me. So this is like the butcher stealing from the Kohen, selling it to another party, in which case the Kohen, who is the affected party, has to go ahead and settle up with the Rishon, settle up with the Tabach, to which the Gemara says, no, I'd rather read it as the Kohen could even go after the butcher, not just me. So what would you have said? Perhaps Kohanic gifts can't be stolen, and they're considered as if they're always in the possession of the Kohen. Kamashmalon, that they can. And according to Abaye, who says that they argue, what are they arguing about? They're arguing about the statement of Rav Chisda. Okay, so Rabbi say, we are still left with our original machlokes, right? Shimon steals from Ruvain, sells it to Levi. After the sale to Levi, Shimon's identity as a thief becomes recognized. Now, who does Ruvain go after for his object? So Rabbi Yochanan says, Rav says, Ruvain's claim is only against the thief. Ruvain has no claim against Levi. And if he wants to get his object back from Levi, he's going to have to pay him, but he can't seize it back from Levi. Rabbi Yochanan says, absolutely not. Ruvain could even go right to Levi, seize his object, and no obligation of compensation. Okay, so let's analyze. Rav Zavid Amar Kegon, Shnesiai Shah Bailam Biad Lokef, Lonesiai Shul Biad Ganav. Oh, this is very interesting. Rav Zavid said, what's the case over here? The case is where Ruvain, the owner, had Yeosh, but only once the object reached the hands of the purchaser of Levi, and didn't have Yeosh when it was in the hands of the Ganav. Interesting. Here's what they're arguing about. Remember we had this before? Yeush by itself doesn't work, right? In order for someone else to acquire a stolen object, there's really two things that have to occur. Remember again, what are the two things? Number one, Shinoi Rishos, a change of domain, and Yeush. What we're going to see now is, does the order of those two things matter? So watch this. The Gemara says, one opinion says that if Yeosh occurs first and then Shinoi Rishus, it works. The Gemara says, however, Shinoi Rishus v'achakach Yeosh lo kani. But if the change of domain occurred before Yeosh, that doesn't work. In other words, that it's order specific. It's order specific. It's Yeosh first, and then Shinoi Rishus. Umar Sav, the other opinion, says Lo Shna. No, it doesn't matter what order it occurs, as long as you have both Yeosh and Shinoi Rishus. So then ultimately, the new purchaser or the new acquirer truly owns the object. Okay, Rav Safra Amar Beglima Dekuli Amalo Pligi Dardalamare. So what Rav Papa says, if we're talking about a case of like a cloak, in other words, that the stolen object is extant Everyone agrees that Levi, the purchaser, is going to give that back to Reuven, the original owner. Rabbi say here, what's the machlokes? The machlokes is, in this case, you're going to say, same case, Shimon stole from Reuven, sold it to Levi. Afterwards, again, we discover the identity of the thief. It's Shimon. Now, who does Reuven go after? So we'll say, so the machlokes over here is, do we, in a case like this, do we institute takanas hashuk for the benefit of Levi? Now we'll say, what's takanas hashuk? This goes back to our Mishnah. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, takanas hashuk al shekino lokeach b'shuk befarhesya v'lo haven bo shenignav asulo takanas sheyishayim lo balabais mosav. So we'll say, takanas hashuk essentially is what we would call buyer protection. In a case where a person purchases something in the marketplace or in a way that has the appearance of an absolutely normal and legitimate transaction. But it turns out that the object is stolen. So, and this is our Mishnah, So Takanas Hashuk says, if you as a purchaser had no reason to assume that there was anything wrong with this transaction, halacha protects you. And what's the buyer protection? What's buyer protection? Buyer protection is, even if it turns out you bought stolen property, the owner of the object has an absolute right to come to you and take his object. But what? He has to pay. I will say, that's takanas hashuk. That's halachic buyer protection. So Rabbi say, now watch this. The question is, in this case that we're talking about over here, is there buyer protection? Rabbi Shmuel Amar. So watch this. Rav named Rabbi Chia said, Hadinim Arishon, that Reuven, the original owner of the object, could only collect from Shimon the thief. Why? So Dina dilokeach dilishkol zuzi miganov. Dina dilokeach dilishkol zuzi miganov. V'lo asaba takanas hashuk. Who says ultimately again the halacha should be that lokeach should go ahead and capture his loss from the Ganov, and therefore they didn't institute Takanas Hashuk. Rabbi Yochanan said, no, the halacha is that his din is with Levi. Dina de lokeach de lishko mi balabais v'asabo Takanas Hashuk. Okay, v'sava Rav lo asu. Rabbi says the Gemara wants to suggest that's the machlokes. V'sava Rav lo asubo takanas hashuk. Does Rav say that we don't institute over here takanas hashuk? V'ha Rav Huna tamidei de Rav Hava. Yet Rav Huna, listen to this case. Rav Huna was the Talmud of Rav. V'chanan bisha ganav glima v'zabna. This guy Chanan Bisha, right? Chanan the bad one. That's his name, right? Or at least that was his mother didn't give him that name. But I'm saying that was his ascribed name, right? So Chanan Bisha Ganav Glima stole a cloak, v'zabna, and he sold it. Now what happened? So now what happens? So now, obviously in this case, Rabbi say you have, so same case, right? Hanan stole it from Reuven and sold it to Levi. So now at this point we recognize that Hanan went ahead and stole it and sold it. So now who does Reuven go after? Does Reuven go after Hanan or does Reuven go after Levi the purchaser? So Rav Huna said to the Rav Huna said to the guy, to the owner, look at Rashi, Zil Shari Avitach, Hatar Mashkoncha Kilomar, Pedei Mashkoncha Shebiyado. So I'll say, interestingly enough, so Rav Huna said to the owner of the object, go to Levi and buy back your item. Buy back your item. In other words, you can get it back from Levi, but you have to buy it back. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Shiny Chanan Bisha, Kevan. So I'll say again, this is a case of Hooker Aganov, right? This is a case of where we know who the thief is, and yet you see clearly that Rav Huna is saying, sorry, right, owner of the object, go ahead, and your claim is really against the thief. If you want to go ahead and you want to get it back from the third party, then go ahead and get it, but you have to pay. So the Gemara says, Shiny Chanan Bisha, Kevan Deleka Lishtalume Mine, Kilo Hooker Dummy. We'll say Chanan Bisha is different. Why? Because we'll say apparently Chanan Bisha wasn't only known to be a thief, but he was also like a relatively powerful guy. And there was absolutely no hope of getting any level of compensation from him. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. In general, even in the case of where let's say we say that owner has the right to go to buyer, right? That Reuven has the right to go to Levi, get his object back without paying Levi. The assumption is what's going to happen next? Levi is going to be able to go to the thief and reclaim his money from the thief. In this case over here, there was no getting any money back from Hanan Bisha. So as such, Rav Huna thought it was inappropriate to leave the buyer in the lurch like this. So therefore he said to the owner, you go to Levi, get back your item, but you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it. The Gemara said, 1 second, I'll say, now watch this. So I just want to point out what we have. Well, let's just pause here for just a moment. So here's what we have happening. What we have happening is the Mishnah introduced to us this concept that if I have property that's stolen from me, and then I see that property in the hands of someone else, the halacha is I can go and I can reclaim that property. But again, now in the Mishnah's case, what has to happen? The purchaser, right? Let's just use the case, right? So Shimon stole from Reuven, right? Sold to Levi, right? So now Reuven could go to Levi and get his stuff back. But what does Levi do? According to the Mishnah, Levi makes a shvuah, swears I paid $1,000 for this, and I pay him. Now, what is that based on? That is based on Takonas Hashok. That is based on Chazal's legislated buyer protection. That when someone buys something in a legitimate transaction and it turns out that it was stolen, the halacha is buyer protection. So as the owner of the object, I have the right to get back my property. But because the purchaser bought it in a legitimate transaction, he's protected, and I essentially have to pay to get back my stuff, as unfair as that seems. Now, the interesting kind of corollary case is, same case. Shimon steals from Reuven, right? Sells it to Levi, but in this case, the identity of the thief becomes known. So I will say, so now, then we have a machlokes, who are we going after in that case, right? So now you have Reuven the owner. Who is Reuven the owner going after in that case, right? Is Reuven going after the thief, or is Reuven going after the purchaser? So that's our machlokes. And I will say what we see over here is Takonas Hashuk is kind of this overarching principle. Now watch this, a very important qualification. Amar Rava, Im Ganav Meforsamhu Lo Asaba Takonas Hashuk. So I will say this is incredible. Now, Takonas Hashuk, buyer protection, only applies when the buyer has every reason to assume, right? Buyer has every reason to assume that this is a legitimate transaction. But if the buyer purchases from a known thief, then I will say, there's no buyer protection in that case. So for example, if it was known that Shimon was a thief, right? Shimon stole from Reuven, sold it to Levi, right? And Levi bought it from him, right? And I will say again, it's known that Shimon is a thief, right? He's got a whole boutique out of his trunk, right? So Lamais, again, this doesn't look on the up and up over here, and it's clear he's known as a thief. There's no buyer protection in that case. In that case, I will say that Reuven has the ability to go to Levi and get back his stuff. Why? Again, the logic is very simple. Chazal only protected you when it was clear that when it was felt that you were engaging in a legitimate transaction. Now, watch this. But here's the problem. What about the case we just mentioned? Chanan Bisha did meforsim hava. Chanan Bisha, we just had this case, right? The guy who bought property from Chanan Bisha, right? Chanan, the bad guy, and yet again, they instituted Takonas Hashuk for him. So the Gemara says, "Vasbot Takonas Hashuk." The Gemara says, "Incredible." Nehi de meforsam lebishusa lignevusa lo meforsam. I'll say, watch this. He had a reputation for being a bad guy, but he didn't have a reputation for theft. Incredible, I will say. In other words, we speak about this all the time. Even Hanan Bisha will say, again, you do not get that nickname, right? And we'll say, I just want to point out, Hanan Bisha, right? He is memorialized for all eternity in Shas by this name, which means that he never did tshuva. Because if he did tshuva, then we wouldn't record him in this way. But Lamais, I shouldn't say we didn't. Who knows what he did or what he didn't do. But the fact that Chazal went ahead and codified him like this is pretty dramatic. Rabbi say what you see is like this. All of us live with our inconsistencies. You see about this all the time. And just because at the end of the day I am a sinner in one area does not make me a rasha in all areas. We all have our areas of inconsistency. We all have our areas of weaknesses. And I will say, but it's very important to know, the beauty of Yiddishkeit and the beauty of spirituality in general is that it's not an all or nothing proposition. Just because I am a spiritual failure in certain areas does not mean that I'm a failure in all areas. And just because I'm a failure in certain areas doesn't mean that I can't be successful in others. Isn't this incredible? This guy Hanan Bisha, whatever he did that got him this nickname, but he wasn't a known he wasn't a known thief. He wasn't a known thief. At the end of the day, again, he wasn't a thief. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, it could very well be that takanas hashuk would even apply to a transaction with him. Such an incredible husband. We'll say, sometimes we get so down on ourselves because we know that there's an area in which I'm so weak, in which I'm so broken, and we think that because I'm so weak and so broken in this one area, there's no hope for me in other areas. But that's not true. If Hanan Bisha could do it, then I will say, certainly I could do it as well. Dramatic. Itmar, let's go. We're making great time over here. Itmar, Ganav Upara Chovov. I'd like to announce the new formation of an Amid Yomi Shir. We're starting with Bava Kamma, and we're going to do it. Itmar, Ganav Upara B'Chovov. I will say, it's too good. It's just too good to. We're already going so fast as it is. It's just too good to go any faster. We'll make it through. Itmar, Ganav Upara B'Chovov. So we'll see now, watch this. So this is actually a very interesting case as well. So the Gemara says, here's the situation. A person went ahead and stole and paid off his debt. Right? Or stole and paid off a collateral. So we'll say, in this case, Chazal didn't institute a takanas hashuk. So let me just show you what happened over here. Right? So same case, Shimon stole from Ruvain, but in this case, again, still Shimon gave it to Levi. But why did Shimon give it to Levi? Why did he give it to Levi? Because he owed Levi money. Right? Or he had a deposit, he had something collateralized with Levi. So he's using the stolen money to pay off a debt. So in this case, I will say, in this case, now, same case. Turns out, again, Shimon becomes recognized as the thief. Reuven recognizes now that Levi has his stuff. What's the halacha? Reuven could go right to Levi and take his stuff without payment. There's no takanas hashuk in this case. Why is there no takanas hashuk in this case? The Amri, lo adaita dahano yohavis lemidi. I'll say it's very simple. Because I will say, in this case over here, Levi didn't lend Shimon the money with the understanding that he was going to be furnished with Reuven's object. In other words, I will say, takanas hashuk is only applied when there is a clear transactional reliance. But when there wasn't a transactional reliance, then we don't apply takanas hashuk. In other words, remember, before Shimon ever stole an object from Reuven, what did he do? Levi lent him money, which means Levi lent him money reliant on something totally different. So because of that, when Shimon then pays back the debt with Reuven's property, we don't apply takanas hashuk in that case. But again, halacha l'maisa, Reuven is able to go right to Levi and reclaim his object. It's very interesting. Take a look at Rashi. Lava daite. Rashi says, "Dahai gineva yahavte lezuze didekame hachi osvisle." This is fascinating. In other words, the loan that Levi made to Shimon happened long before Shimon ever stole anything from Reuven. As such, there was no reliance on the object or on the money, or whatever it was, that Shimon subsequently stole from Reuven and gave to Levi. Because of that, Chazal did not afford buyer protection in this kind of case. So interesting. Shemar goes weiter. Da'anoyav is a good. Mashkanta shavi masan b'meya asuot takanas hashuk. So I will say, mashkavi shavi masan b'meya. Let's say, we'll say, look at this case. Look at Rashi. Mashkanta shav. No, not yet. So mashkanta shavi masan b'meya. Let's say again, there was a collateral that was worth 200, and he gave him this object worth 100. Asuot takanas hashuk. In that case, they institute takanas hashuk. Shav b'shava. What about for an equal amount? In other words, that the amount given was equal to the amount of the collateral. So what's that? Amir said in this case they did not take takanas hashuk. Rashi says because that's an uncommon case. Marzucha Amar asuvot takanas hashuk. Marzucha said no, they did takanas hashuk. Zvina shava b'shava. What happens if it was a sale? Right, it was a sale for equal amounts. Then asuvot takanas hashuk. Then they made takanas hashuk in that case. Shava mana b'masan. What happens if it was worth 100 for 200. Rav Sheshes Amar Lo Asabo Tachanas Hashuk. Rav Sheshes didn't do Tachanas Hashuk in that case. Rava Amar Asabo Tachanas Hashuk. V'Hilchasa, we'll say the halacha is Bekulu in all of these cases. Asu bo Tachanas Hashuk lebar miganav upara bichovo ganav upara behekefo. We'll say the bottom line the Gemara says is Tachanas Hashuk applies in any case where the buyer bought assuming that this was a legitimate transaction and then it turns out to be stolen property. The only exception where Tachanas Hashuk doesn't apply is again about saying the case of a loan. Where again, Shimon had borrowed money from Ruvain beforehand, from Levi, and then stolen object from Ruvain, used the stolen object to go ahead and repay Levi. In that case, Tachanas Hashuk doesn't apply, and the logic is sound. The logic is because the loan transaction had nothing to do with the property that Shimon subsequently stole from Ruvain, because again, the loan was made way before the theft ever occurred. Therefore, there's no buyer protection in such a case like that. But in any other case, Rabbi say, where there is a legitimate transaction, we do apply the buyer protection of Tachanas Hashuk. Quite fascinating. Rabbi say, now the one case that we don't yet have the halacha l'maisa for is again the machlokes Rav and Rav Yochanan. We're still going to come back to that case. We'll see the Rav in the next sugi with this. About say that's the case of where Hooker Aganov, right? Shimon steals from Ruvain, sells it to Levi. We now discover who Shimon is. Who does Ruvain go after? Does Rav say now bepashtos? It kind of becomes clear. Why does it become clear? Who does Ruvain go after in that case? Who does he go after? He really has to go after the thief, because Rav say, remember again, once you have Tachanas Hashuk, once you have buyer protection says that Levi, as long as Levi was a what appeared to be a legitimate transaction, Levi's covered. If Levi's covered, that means if Reuven wants to go to Levi, he can. But what does he have to do? He has to pay. So it sounds like in that machlokes, it really sounds like we're passing like Rav, that in this kind of case where there was a legitimate transaction, Levi's protected by Tachanas Hashuk, and Reuven's only recourse is really against the thief himself. All right, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, Avimi bar Nazi, Chamud Ravina Hava. So we'll say, so Avimi bar Nazi was the father-in-law of Ravina. Hava Masik Ba'u Gavra Abar Zuzi. He lent the guy 4 zuz. So what happened? Ganav Galima Asinehele. So what happened? So apparently the borrower went ahead and stole a cloak. All right, unbeknownst to Avimi, he stole a cloak. And it sounds like that cloak was like repayment for the first 4 zuz. Osve arba zuzi achrini. And therefore again, Avimi lent him another 4 zuz. Lusof hokar agan. I will say at the end of the day, it turned out that it became clear that the borrower was really a thief. So they brought this case before Ravina. Amar Kamma ganav upara bechavo v'lo bay lemesav le v'lo midi. So we'll say. So listen to this. So essentially, Avimi said like this. We look at the first. Kamma ganav upara bechavo. We'll say this sounds like a case of a thief who paid off his debt. With stolen property. V'lo bay lemesav le v'lo midi. Hanach arba zuzi achrini shakel zuzach v'hader glimi. I will say, but the second set of zuzim, right? Return the money, right? Take your money and ultimately give back the cloak. Maske for Rav Coin, the Dilma Glima Bahani Zuzi Kamma Yavanihile. But maybe the cloak ultimately again was given by the first set of zuzim. Ganav opara bechavo, ganav opara behekefo. So va'arba zuzi basray, and maybe we'll say this should be a case of a thief who stole, paid off his debt, or a thief who stole and paid off his collateral. In which case again Tachanas Hashuk doesn't apply. Va'arba zuzi basray hemune hemini, and maybe for the second set of zuzim, ultimately the cloak has nothing to do with anything, but maybe the cloak was he just gave him the zuz because he felt he was a credible individual. So the matter escalated. He came up for Rabbi Avo. Amar Hilchasa Krav Kohen. He passed in the halachas like what Rav Kohen said before. Narsha Ganav Safra Zvine Lepapunoi Betimnin Zuzi. All right, so let's say another case. Excuse me. This Narshan, these are nationalities. This Narsha guy, he stole a sefer and he sold it to a paponoi for 80 zuz, betamnin zuzi. Azal paponoi, zabni lebar mechuz, and b'mei ve'esrim, the paponoi took it, he resold it for 120. Okay, l'sof hokar aganav. At the end, right? They found out who the thief was. Amar Abaye lezel mari de safra. So now, who do you go after? When do you go after for? Let the owner of the sefer go. V'yarv le bar mechuza tamnin. Let him give it to the guy who bought right there for the mechuzah. Give him 80 zuz. V'shakal safrei. Let him get back his sefer. V'azal bar mechuzah. V'shakal arban papanoi. Let the mechuzah guy go and collect another 40 from the papanoi. Maskef arava. Hashal lokech mi ganav azal takanas ashuk. Lokech mi boy. I don't say if there's buyer protection for someone who buys from a thief. Alachas Kamma v'Kamma. There should be buyer protection for who? For a guy for the purchaser from the purchaser. Ela amarava. Rather, what should happen in this case? Lezel marei the safra. Let the owner of the sefer come along. Let him give to the guy who bought from the mechuzin, right, 120 zuz. V'shakal safrei. Let him take back his book. In other words, he has to pay full price to go at the final purchase price to get back his sefer. V'leizel mar de safra v'leshkal arbami paponoi v'tamnem inarsha. And let the guy who bought it for 120, he'll collect 40 from the paponoi and 80 from the narsha. Okay, we'll say takeaway. What's the takeaway? What's the takeaway? Number one takeaway is we move very slowly. Number two takeaway, we'll say. Number two takeaway is that halacha l'maaseh, we'll say there is something called takanas hashuk. Takanas hashuk is buyer protection. Buyer protection means that if it turns out you stole stolen property, you bought stolen property, but you had every reason to believe that it was a legitimate transaction, halacha l'maaseh, you are covered. And if the owner of the object wants to get that back from you, then what does he do? He pays you the amount that you paid. Now, I want to point out, let's say you say, but I don't want to sell it, I don't want to give it back, so that you don't have the right to do. Once it's been determined that it's stolen property, you must give it back, but you are entitled to be made whole for the full purchase price. That is takanas hashavin. If, however, we'll say, when doesn't takanas hashavin apply? If you buy from a known thief, then which makes sense. The halacha doesn't go ahead and cover you. If it turns out to both say that we identify who the thief is, who does the owner have recourse against? Because the Takanas Hashavin really only has recourse against the thief, doesn't have recourse against the buyer. Incredible. Mishnah. Zeba b'chalis shayam, zeba b'chalis shal dvash. We actually made reference to this case last week. Watch this. Ruvain is carrying a barrel of wine. Shimon is carrying a barrel of honey. What happens? Nistika chavish al dvash. Now we'll say, this case presupposes that honey is more valuable than wine in this particular case. So what happens? So now we'll say, I don't remember who I said what, but okay, the owner of the barrel of the honey, nistika chavish al dvash, v'shafech zes, hitzlas hadvash lasocho. So watch this, we'll say, so honey guy, wine guy, his barrel cracks. What did wine guy do? Wine guy dumps out the contents of his barrel in order to save his friend's honey. Okay, so we'll say, now what's talacha? Amud beis, ein lo ella scharo. So we'll say, so now remember again, wine guy, after this whole thing happens, wine guy, feeling like the hero, says, you know what is he expecting from honey guy? What is he expecting from honey guy? Full compensation for his lost wine. So honey guy says, I didn't ask you to do any of this. So we'll say, the halacha is with the honey guy, and honey guy is only obligated to go ahead and give wine guy what? Scharo. We'll say, scharo means labor. Literally again, the use, which means essentially barrel rental and work. Barrel rental and work. Okay. However, if wine guy said to honey guy, listen, honey guy, here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to dump out my wine, save your honey, but you need to pay me for my wine and for any other incurred services. And honey guy says yes, then chayiv litelo. Then ultimately, again, which makes sense. Honey guy is obligated to go ahead and compensate wine guy for the value of his wine. Shut off, similar case. Shut off nachal chamoro, the chamer chavero, shalo yafem mana v'shal chavero masayim. So we'll say, now watch this. You have two donkey guys, right? One guy has a donkey that's worth $1,000, and another guy has a donkey that's worth $2,000. He got the full trim on the donkey package, right? He's got heated seats, right? He's got everything, right? So Lamaisa gets, now what happens? Now they're both in the river. So what happens? Expensive donkey is about to get swept away for the current. So cheap donkey guy says to expensive donkey guy, here's the deal, right? He doesn't say anything. Said, what does he do? He says that says shalom to his cheap donkey. Let's take a step downstream in order to save expensive donkey. He then goes over to the owner of expensive donkey guy, Ein lo ela scharo, expecting payment. Expensive donkey guy says, "Thank you so much. Here's the whatever you worked for 2 hours. Here's the money for your labor." Shkoyach, that's it. Vim amarlo ani etzel shalcha v'atanosin le'ashali chaylit. However, if cheap donkey guy says to expensive donkey guy, "Here's the deal. I'm willing to let go of my cheap fashleptzach donkey in order to go ahead and save your Lexus Cadillac donkey," right? Then fine, and he agrees, and he says yes. Then ultimately, again, then expensive donkey guy is obligated to go ahead and compensate cheap donkey guy for the value of the cheap donkey. Incredible. Says the Gemara, "Va'amai." But why is this? We'll say this is great. This is so fantastic. We'll have to stop with this, but this is fantastic. Listen to this. We'll say, let's go back to case one, because it's much easier to say wine and honey versus cheap and expensive donkey. Listen to this. So when the barrel of honey breaks open, so we'll say, so essentially in that case the honey is lost. The honey is effectively hefker. Is hefker. So why don't we say that when the wine guy dumps out his wine and begins to go ahead and collect the honey, he's essentially collecting honey from hefker, and it really should be his. Milotain, did we not learn? So let's listen to this. If a person was going ahead and carrying barrels of wine or barrels of oil, and he saw that they were beginning to break. Lo yomer harei truma u'maiser ha'per shel beisi. So I said, "This is actually a great chap. This is a great chap, right? I'm carrying my oil and my wine, and what happens? I see that they're about to break. So what happens? I should not say that, you know what, they're trumas and maestros on stuff that I have in my house. Because I will say, by designating them as trumas and maestros, then what's the halacha? If they're lost, they're lost. It's not my problem. It's the Kohen or Levi's problem. That's a great chap. So you shouldn't do that. So the Gemara says, Ve'im amar lo amar klum. And by the way, if you did say it, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work, Rabbi saying? Because the assumption is, since these barrels are about to break, that is considered to be like the produce inside the wine or the oil is lost, which means that it's hefker. It's hefker. So therefore it's not a valid designation, because hefker. So what do you see from here? You see from here that stuff that comes from broken barrels is considered to be ownerless. If that's the case, then halacha l'maisa, when the honey guy, right, when his barrel is breaking and wine guy comes to scoop it up, ultimately wine guy should acquire it because it's hefker. Rabbi say, what's the case? The case is where, again, the barrel had some type of netting around it. So the netting, essentially, Rabbi say, even when the barrel was beginning to split, the netting would keep it together for a time, enough time to be able to collect it in some other receptacle, and therefore it's not considered to be hefker. Rabosai, shkoyach. We'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up and answer with this tomorrow. Great Gemara. Shkoyach, everyone. Good morning, Sean. Great to see you. How are you?
Good. I want to say a temporary goodbye. I'm going to Israel.